Hey guys, my name is EJ Spurl, and today we're talking about women against feminism. Welcome to Trigger Warning. Over the last month or so, social media has exploded with the hashtag women against feminism. From what I can tell, it seems to mostly come from a Tumblr blog that bears the exact same name, featuring women both young and old holding up signs explaining why they feel they don't need feminism. The backlash against these women was swift. It contained everything from reasonable appeals from moderate feminists, to satirical responses with straw man arguments, to outright vitriol, insults, and even threats against them from feminists, insulted by the idea that there are women out there who feel that they don't need feminism to speak for them. But is it insulting? Is it really? Let's take a look.
Okay, so here we have a young lady who says she doesn't need feminism because she's an adult who is capable of taking responsibility for herself and her actions. She defines herself and derives her value by her own standards and does not need to be empowered. She's not a target for violence, and there's no war against her. She respects men and refuses to demonize them and blame them for her problems. There's one. I feel that this woman has a very good point here. She feels that she doesn't need feminism because oppression is universal and has far more to do with how wealthy your parents are rather than whether you were born without a Y chromosome. I like it. And here we have a rather mindful appearing young lady that does not need feminism because she recognizes that there are men's rights issues as well as women's, and we need to stop ignoring them. She's anti-feminist, pro-equality. This woman's sign is a little bit longer. She says she takes responsibility for her actions and her choices. She's not a victim. She loves men for their courage, generosity, and kindness. And she doesn't need feminism because men and women are in essence equal but different. We need each other for balance. Feminism has ruined the symbiotic relationship. And then she goes on to say she doesn't need feminism because it's a crock of shit. And this one here I think I'm going to let speak for itself. And this woman seems to feel that she doesn't need feminism because no woman should ever have to be called stupid, ignorant, or trash by the people who claim to be fighting for their rights. Yeah.
For the most part, their criticisms of feminism seem kind of reasonable. Now let's take a look at the responses.
And our first one comes from a Tumblr blog. I have omitted all the information because honestly, we really don't need to be attacking these people. Let's just let the arguments sit as they stand. But here's what she has to say. I want someone to whistle at you and call you mammy and all those dirty things, and then come back to me and tell me how you feel. Plus, this is the 21st century and no one really lives by traditional family constructs as much anymore. Lastly, you aren't responsible for anything a man does to you because he can't keep it in his pants. You're blatantly promoting victim blaming like it's no fucking problem. I have a lot of problems with this statement, and it's just ridiculous. First of all, mammy, I guess maybe if you live in a primarily Latino area, that could have something to do with that. I'm just saying, right? And just because it's the 21st century doesn't mean that no one lives by traditional family constructs anymore. And besides, what's wrong with the traditional family construct? I'm not saying it's the rule, but like, what's wrong with it? Nothing, really. And I'm not even going to touch the part about men not being able to keep it in their pants. I can keep it in my pants pretty good. I know there's a line, and I don't think I've ever crossed it. So yeah, we're just going to keep that there. And as for blatantly promoting victim blaming, please, guys, please, can you just decide on one definition of what victim blaming is? The Christy Mack situation? Okay, if you're blaming her for that, yeah, you're victim blaming. But suggesting that you can't take preventive measures against rape? I'm sorry, I can lock my car door and guess what? Nobody's going to break into it to steal stuff unless they really, really, really want to. And that person's a sociopath. You can't really do anything about them. Now, this woman here took a number of photos, and this is just the one that I chose from the list here. It's all satire, right? She's trying to be satirical. And she says she doesn't need feminism because she's a teenager who hasn't entered the workforce yet. And She doesn't know what constant sexual harassment or watching unqualified people get promoted over her feels like. Now, the problem I have with this one is that clearly a lot of the women who partake in the Women Against Feminism movement are older. Erin Pitsey is an active men's rights activist, and she's like in her 70s. I'm not actually 100% sure how old she was. She was born in the 1930s sometime, so probably a bit older than 70. Anyways, as for the unqualified people, how does she know? How is she the judge of that? She cannot be the judge of that. It's that simple. People always think that they're better than their neighbor. It's a reality, okay? And I'm not saying that maybe she was qualified, but maybe her attitude had something to do with it. You never know. I don't need feminism because 77 cents on a dollar seems completely reasonable to me. Okay, first of all, that's bullshit. Okay, nobody's getting paid 77 cents for a man's dollar. It's just not happening. Okay, find one job that does that. One job. Okay? You can't. You can't point one out. This is an average taken over an entire year's salary in a number of different positions. It doesn't account for what positions are being taken. It doesn't account for time off. It doesn't account for a lot of things. Now, there might be a little bit of a wage gap somewhere. There might be. Okay, there's things like maternity leave, which are usually granted to women, and sometimes are granted to men, granted. But at the same time, there are so many other factors at play here that lead to that 77 cents on the dollar, and they've been explained time and time again. So I'm not going to bother debunking that because it has been debunked by people much better than myself, so we're going to let that stand. And on to the tweets here. The ridiculous idea that all feminists are man-haters is beginning to irritate me. Do your research. Unfortunately, you got a point, okay? Yes, not all feminists are man-haters. I agree with that 100%. I know feminists and who love men and who are very interested in the subject of men's rights as well. However, the fact of the matter is that a huge chunk of the community are man-haters, okay? I'm not saying it's the majority, but there's enough of them to make it a problem. And that carries with it a negative connotation. So you've got to keep that in mind. And what do we got here? The tweets under Women Against Feminism are full of people who cannot adequately define feminism. Okay, newsflash. Feminists can't even adequately define feminism, okay? Yeah, they jump to the dictionary definition a lot of the time, but the fact of the matter is that they go much further than that, okay? There are different types of feminists, okay? Some of them are man-haters. Some of them feel that, like women should be at the top of the food chain instead of equal with men, okay? So you can't. This is an argument that you can't really use against the Women Against Feminism, and you can't use it against feminists because nobody can adequately define it. Egalitarianism, on the other hand, is a pretty equally defined word. Go figure. You know what's more ridiculous than Women Against Feminism? Nothing. There is nothing more ridiculous. I'm pretty sure I can think of a few things.
In my very humble male opinion, feminists need to take a lesson from their own book. Listen to women. Of all the arguments that I've seen against the Women Against Feminism, there seems to be a common theme. And that seems to be, oh, well, these women just don't understand what feminism really is. And so, it's pretty simple to just discount their opinions. So what is feminism? Our friend, the dictionary, defines feminism as advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of equality of the sexes and development of female characteristics in a male person. 1982. I need to get a new dictionary. But that's it. And if that's the definition of feminism, then in the Western world at least, it appears as though the job's been done. There are no ways from a legal standpoint in which men are benefited over women. On the other hand, I can name several ways in which women benefit from the legal system over men. But that's not what this discussion is about. So maybe we need to dig a little deeper. Let's take a look at what feminists have to say about feminism. Charisse Cremera says that feminism is the radical notion that women are human beings. Okay, no argument there. Check. Nancy Reagan says that feminism is the ability to choose what you want to do. Right. People can do what they want with their lives. Check. Annie DeFranco says that either you are a feminist or a misogynist. There is no box marked other. In other news, you're either a Christian or a Satanist. There is no in between. It's not like the entire spectrum of egalitarian ideology is dominated by one catch-all word. Look, the thing is that many of the arguments against the women against feminism are rather silly. I can detach myself from the ideology and still consider women just as important as the men in my life. I was born to a mother, and I love my mother. I have a daughter, and I want her to grow up to be strong, independent, and responsible. And more importantly, I want her to enjoy her life without jumping in fear every time a man farts too loudly in her direction. In other places in the world, I will fully agree that there are women who are facing extreme discrimination and oppression. Feminism, as it exists, does have a reason to be there. But telling these women that they're stupid, that they're idiots, that they can't think for themselves, or disassociate themselves from feminism is not only wrong, but it's somewhat totalitarian. They're free to travel their own path, free of any man who might think to tell them what to do. But the same can be said for almost any woman who thinks to do the same, at least in the Western world. They are free people doing with their lives as they choose. Whether or not it's feminism that gave them that ability is arguable, but it's clear that they have that ability. And that's not even denying that feminism hasn't been useful in the past. They're saying that they don't find it useful today. And because most of the goals of feminism have been achieved, they don't feel they need it. So how and why does the idea of women making their own choices threaten feminists? Wasn't that the whole point of feminism? Look, if you feel that there are ways in which women are being disadvantaged in society, talk about them. But the fact that these women are speaking their minds should make you proud of how far feminism has come. Not make you froth at the mouth and attack them, sometimes viciously. For a good example, hop on over to Twitter and take a look at the Women Against Feminism hashtag. Wow. Women against feminism? I salute you. It's a brave thing to do to speak out against something that could potentially alienate you from friends and family. I've found that in my case, even being critical of one fringe aspect of feminism has caused people that I've known and loved for years to write me off as though I was Hitler, despite the fact that I believe in the idea of a level playing field where gender disparity is an issue. Also, feminists, you need to take into consideration that despite what you believe feminism is, doesn't necessarily make it true. Actions speak louder than words. It might be the reality for your personal viewpoint, but others view it differently. Some of the complaints that these women against feminism have are directly addressing those that do view it differently. Because the reality is that there are some feminists that do hate men. There are some feminists that believe that any sort of heterosexual sex is rape. And some believe that men face no systemic oppression of their own, and the ones that do are simply whining. There are even some that believe the amount of men should be lowered to about 10% of the human race. You see, feminism is not one unifying ideology. It's a spectrum. Much like religion. If a Buddhist doesn't get offended when an atheist criticizes a New Age ideology, then you might want to ask yourself why you're getting offended when a woman decides that she's going to criticize an aspect of feminism that you yourself don't even agree with. I personally don't have any problems with your average on-the-street feminist. Chances are most of these women don't either. But I do have a problem with specific ideologies that fall under the blanket of feminism. And so do these women. And if these fringe views on feminism conflict with your own views on feminism, then perhaps you should have a problem with them too. This whole women against feminism thing is extremely relieving to see. But I feel that much of the arguing is stemming from personal definition of certain words. It's remarkable how similar people's viewpoints are, but some call it feminism, some call it humanism, and some call it egalitarianism. Either way, in my opinion, if feminism is to gain back a positive reputation among women, it needs to schism. Because there's no such thing as a generic feminist. There are so many different types, is it any wonder that the public chooses to focus on the most negative from within? Every group will be judged by its worst members. This is a standard across the board. But when the worst get worse, action must be taken. Those preaching hatred from within must be shouted down if they can't be reasoned with. Yes, there are some bad people in the world, in every group, everywhere, both men and women that lack conscience. These are the exception. But the rule is that most people try to live by a moral code. Do no harm to others, live free, see the good in people. But it's hard to see beyond labels, especially when members of a group specifically do harm to you. I criticize feminism, yes, but that's because I believe in the original definition of it, equality. And what I see coming from it today is anything but. I count myself as an egalitarian. I believe in an equal playing field, but when one team has a handicap, it's never a fair game. The pendulum does not need to keep swinging. It needs to stop altogether. So thanks a lot for your time, guys. As always, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the subject. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
Yep.
John is thinking about growing his hair out into dreadlocks.
I was considering it, yes.
I wouldn't do that, John.
Why not?
Because of culture.